Hey, so now I'm gonna make a more topical video than what I usually do. I'm gonna be talking about football in China. Um, there's been a lot of moves to China recently involving, well, over the past sort of 5, 6, 10 years or so, I suppose, they've been starting to really spend a lot of their money on footballers from Europe and South America and coaches and managers. They're getting a lot of big names, and the transfer season that's going on at the moment, there's still moves being made as we speak. I woke up this morning to another move, and yesterday there was another move from a player from one of the biggest teams in Europe, who's a sort of he's been there for a few years and he's a veteran player, arguably one of the best players in Europe, going to China. So I think it's quite a good discussion. So yeah, lots of players are moving to China for large amounts of money. Let me think. Recently, a Chinese consortium paid 265 million for 13% ownership stake in Manchester City. At the same time, they're spending all this money, but their national team is ranked 93rd between Botswana and the Faroe Islands. So it makes you wonder, how much, if they should be putting more into homegrown talent, but I'll touch on that later. There's very few Chinese players in Europe. There's only, over the past decade or so, there's only been a few who ever really made any impact whatsoever in Europe or played for any European teams. Looking at the national team on Wikipedia, there's only one Chinese national player currently playing in Europe, and that is I can't remember his name and I can't find it on my page, but Zhang Chengdong, and he was playing for Rayo Vallecano in Spain. He's 27 years old. He's the only Chinese national player playing in Europe at the moment, and the rest of them are all playing in China. What else is there? Yeah, so a few years back, news sort of rocked the football world when it was announced that I think Nicholas Anelka was the first person to go to China. He went, obviously Nicholas Anelka's a huge star in football, so that was big news when that happened, and he went to Shanghai Shenhua, and he was followed the following year. I mean, obviously there were other foreign players playing in China at the moment, but not of his sort of fame. And then he was followed the next year by Didier Drogba, who moved from Chelsea. Was he from Chelsea, or did he go from America to China? I can't remember. But I think it was America, or he went to America afterwards. I can't remember. Anyway, yeah, so Drogba joined Shenhua for £200,000 a week. Anelka was on similar money. So, at the time they're both kind of getting on in football terms. Didier Drogba was still a huge star, as was Anelka really. But makes you wonder if they had moved to any other club, would they be able to command or get that kind of money? If Drogba had gone to Arsenal, would they give him 200,000 a week? Or Anelka had gone to Manchester City or Liverpool, would they give him 200,000 a week? Even now, that sort of money is usually, even in the Premier League, sort of reserved for the Eden Hazards, the Costas, people like that. Huge stars. Silly amounts of money really going to these players. Okay, so let me have a look. Yeah, so I mean, this Chinese company buying into Manchester City is obviously a money making thing, along with wanting to improve, the presence of football, improve the popularity. If they're going to be selling a lot more shirts in China. There's going to be a lot more of a presence for Manchester City in China now. Now this news gets out. I mean, in China, basketball is the number one sport. You see people everywhere wearing. Obviously, I think that's mainly down to Yao Ming, I think he's retired now. He used to play for, was it the Rockets or the Chicago Bulls? I don't even know. I should look into that before. I think he's retired now, but he was like a very famous basketball player. I think he was very tall, like 7 foot something, and so he really raised the popularity of basketball in China. But football is the second. It's definitely obvious that basketball is number one. You see kids carrying basketballs everywhere, whereas in England, you'd see people carrying footballs everywhere, wearing football shirts. You do see people wearing football shirts in China, and I think it's starting to become a lot more popular. The day after, I think it was 2 days after Memphis Depay joined Manchester United, I remember looking out the window of my school and seeing somebody walk across the plaza of where I work wearing a Manchester United shirt with Memphis on the back, which I thought was quite strange, quite funny. Just 2 days after, before the dust had even really settled on his move to Manchester United. I play football in China, and the facilities are actually really good, probably better. This is just seven-a-side football, and the facilities available in Shanghai anyway are ridiculous. In England, I used to play on a 3G pitch, just 5-a-side, and but in China, in Shanghai, when you play 7-a-side, you rent basically a whole stadium. It's great. You get a whole stadium and floodlights, and there's usually it's really good surface. And it's like you get the feeling that you're playing on at a higher level than you really are, which is good for me, anyway. And it's usually right next to. I mean, they don't do things on half measures in China. If they're going to build some football facilities, they won't put up some cheap goalposts and net, and say they draw some lines on the floor and say, there you go. They're going to build something ridiculous. They'll build a huge stadium or a huge good training facilities where you can play and rent them out, and it's not even that expensive to rent these places out either, which is good. Where I play is right next to where Shanghai SIPG play, near Shanghai Indoor Stadium. So our pitch, I'll get a video later, our pitch where we play is overshadowed by the stadium itself, which is quite cool. And then surrounding it, there's lots of other basketball courts and sporting facilities and things like that. After Anelka and Drogba came to China, they both sort of left fairly quickly. There were problems with Shanghai Shenhua at the time, reports of Anelka saying he didn't get paid, and I think Drogba had the same issues, and then there was a big problem with the ownership there, and I think they got rid of him, or them, or whoever they were, and got some new people in there said to be kind of back on their feet now in regards to financial issues. And there was also a big problem with match fixing scandals. There were some ridiculous score lines. I remember seeing one about some second division or third division Chinese team losing 60-0. And all the referees were arrested, and then there's other higher up ones where teams lost 6-0, 10-0, and it was all down to match fixing. So yeah, that was a big, that caused lots of problems for the reputation of Chinese football at the time. I think it may have stopped a few people coming out here for a few years at least anyway. But now it's definitely back on track. Lots of clubs are spending silly amounts of money to bring stars from Europe and South America to China. So yeah, I'm going to go into that, you know. Let me just change the page. Yeah. So let me talk about some of the players that play in China at the moment. So Shanghai SIPG, which is the club that's closest to me. Last year they signed Asamoah Gyan, former Sunderland striker. He used to, he was really good at Sunderland, and then he went out to the Middle East, and he was getting silly money out there. And he joined Shanghai SIPG for 227,000 a week at 30 years old. A 30-year-old player who's been playing in the Middle East, you know, not in the Premier League. Getting that kind of money, it would never happen, I don't think, unless you're Messi or Ronaldo or some amazing striker. Getting that kind of money is pretty much... And the thing is, like, going to a league like the Chinese Super League, which it's not... I'm not trying to get all high and mighty about the Premier League, obviously, or the Italian Serie A, or the French League, or Spanish League, but the Chinese Super League isn't the Premier League, and it's not the other leagues. And paying these kind of money is quite... I think that's what's turning a lot of heads about Chinese football at the moment, all these players going there for silly amounts of money. So yeah, who else we got? Shanghai SIPG, we've got the manager, Sven-Göran Eriksson, obviously the old manager of England, former manager of England. Their goalkeeper coach is Ian Walker. When I was a youngster, I was a big Spurs fan, and obviously know Ian Walker from being the Spurs goalkeeper. So I thought that was quite strange when I first saw it. Then we've got Guangzhou Evergrande. I think they recently played Barcelona in the AFC, the World Club Football Championship. They lost 3-0 to Barcelona, which isn't a bad result, you know, for a Chinese team, you know, considering Barcelona can dish out bigger defeats to, most recently, 7-0 to Valencia. So that's not too bad, really. They've just signed Jackson Martinez from Porto. Yeah. Really good striker. They signed him for 30 million. I think he's, 29 years old. He's formerly from Porto and Athletic Madrid. Guangzhou Evergrande have also got the former Spurs midfielder, Paulinho. And their manager is Luis Felipe Scolari of Brazil, and formerly of Brazil and Chelsea and Portugal. Guangzhou Evergrande are like they're the Leicester City at the moment, I suppose, of, you know, they're the Man United City. They're the big team in China, along with Shanghai SIPG and Shanghai. Yeah. So, then Shanghai Shenhua, there's a few teams in Shanghai, but the main ones are Shanghai SIPG and Shanghai Shenhua. Shenhua is where Drogba and Anelka went. They've got Demba Ba from Chelsea. I think he went to Greece for a bit, or he went somewhere, I can't remember. They've got Freddie Guarin from Porto and Inter. They've got Tim Cahill. And they've also, this morning I saw, they've just signed another player from, where is it? Obafemi Martins. He was playing at Seattle Sounders, former Birmingham striker. But he's now gone to Shanghai Shenhua. He's 30 years old too. Yeah, Tim Cahill from Red Bulls, he's 36. That happened last year. He was a former Everton player. Then Jiangsu Suning, they've got Ramirez from Chelsea for 25 million. That happened at the start of this transfer season, I think. Yeah, 25 million, 28 years old. And then one of the reasons that I wanted to make this video is that you know, not only are they paying these huge sums of money for, or you might say, players who are not past their prime, but you know, they're not going to get that money elsewhere, you know, which is not a bad thing. You know, if they can, you know, football, you know, it starts as a passion, but if they can get ridiculous amounts of money for it, and then why not? You know, where do you draw the line on loyalties and whatever? You know, I know if I was 28 and Chelsea are offering me 30,000 a week and some club in China offering me 200,000 a week, I know what I'd be doing. So yeah, they've just Jiangsu Suning. Like I said, one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is that they've snapped up Alan Teixeira from Shakhtar Donetsk. The interesting thing about this is that he's not what you might say an aging player. He's 25. He's in his prime. And another thing is that Liverpool were after him. You know, Liverpool offered Shakhtar 30 million for him, and they said no. And then the next week, Jiangsu Suning snapped him up for 50 million. What's interesting about that is that, you know, he's a target. He's an actual transfer target. Big teams in Europe like Liverpool and probably a few other teams are looking to get him in to really improve their squad. You know, they're not looking to get him in to sell T-shirts or anything like that. They're really, you know, he's a real target, and that's, you know, the amount of money that China has. If they can come in and snap up a player in his prime, which big European teams are looking for, you know, what does that say about the future of football, you know, in Europe, when China is able to take away these big names that other teams are after? I think it's interesting, you know, maybe over the next few years we'll see that happen more often. Youngsters coming through that are big targets in Europe, and, you know, Real Madrid wants somebody for 40 million, and then Shanghai SIPG say, nope, we'll give you 75 million, you know. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens in regards to things like that. So yeah, Jiangsu Suning have Alan Teixeira and Ramirez. Beijing Guojiang, they have Renato Augusto, former Bayer Leverkusen and Corinthians player. You know, he's 28. I couldn't find any details about how much he cost or anything like that. So Hebei China Fortune, they have the former Arsenal and Roma winger, Gervinho. He's 28 years old. That happened, that happened this transfer season as well. So yeah, and then there was another one, like I mentioned, something, I just saw it yesterday. What team was it? It was Lavezzi from PSG. He's gone to, I think it's Hebei China Fortune as well. Yeah, I think he's gone to the same team as Gervinho. So Lavezzi has gone there from PSG. You know, he's a big player in Europe. And that's quite interesting too, you know. I mean, he's the same. He's about 30, maybe more than 30 years old. He's probably just signed a huge contract there. Yeah, and so, I mean, I'll explain. The teams in China, they have, I don't know exactly what the rules are in the Premier League, but there's not allowed to be more than 4 international players on the pitch, I think, in China, or on your whole team. Looking at Wikipedia, no team has more than 5 international players on them. So that they say that is to encourage homegrown talent, improving the Chinese players rather than just spending big on European and just filling them with South Americans. I mean, the majority of international players in China are Brazilians. They seem to be Brazilians. I don't know why that is. They have quite a lot of. To me, I'm not a football savant. I don't know every single player in the world, like some people seem to do. But they have these Brazilians. I don't know a lot of them. A lot of them are sort of. I look at their things on Wikipedia. They come from Corinthians or Sao Paulo, so they must have been up and coming then. And then, rather than stay there, they take big money in China, which, like I said before, I don't think is a bad thing. So yeah, what does this say about the future for football in China? I mean, they're still in the process of trying to qualify for the World Cup. China have never really done anything in the World Cup. And, with all this money being spent and all this, they're also putting so much money into the infrastructure of football, trying to improve it on a grassroots level. I suppose bringing big names in is a good way to do it, it gets people's attention. But now it seems like they're trying to... Hey, sorry, I forgot to delete some of the old videos I've made from my phone, so my phone just stopped recording halfway through. I continued jabbering for about 2 minutes before I realised, so I'm going to carry on from where I was, which I think was talking about grassroots football in China. So yeah, they're investing a lot more into the infrastructure and making it more accessible for people. They've got pitches everywhere. Everybody sees posters. You see Ronaldo on the underground. You see Messi on the underground, selling their football boots. Football equipment is quite expensive out here, unless you want to get some cheapo stuff from Decathlon or something. I don't know if that's part of the luxury goods thing, but I went to buy some footballing gear yesterday from, you go to a Nike shop or an Adidas shop, and it's more, rather than selling fitness gear, they sell sort of sporting fashion gear. So if you want to buy a windbreaker, I bought a red Adidas windbreaker, that would probably cost you about £10-15 in England. It's more, I had to pay like £50 for it, or 500 kwai, just to get a windbreaker to go and play football in, because it was cold. So yeah, anyway, the football, future of football in China, they have the rules that only 5 international players can be on the pitch at one time, which is good. They say that's to improve the standard of local footballers Chinese footballers, rather than just getting international footballers playing all the time, which is good. In England, you'll struggle to find a team in the Premier League, at least, with especially the big teams, with more English players on the pitch than foreigners, or international players rather. And yeah, that's probably a good thing. England's football has been not great since, I suppose you could argue, since we won the World Cup. We have these huge names, but they don't seem to perform on the international stage, which is the same as, well, it's not the same as China, because they don't have huge names, but maybe in a few years that will change, and that'll be really interesting to see if, within the next decade there's going to be some big players coming out of China, the next generation. A lot of the Chinese international players, they're quite old too, which, I suppose if you're playing international games you do want experience, but there's no sort of standout youngsters. I did a little bit of research and I couldn't really find any Chinese players that are tipped to be the next big thing in China, the next Messi or whatever. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do They still haven't qualified. Their next games are fairly easy games. I can't remember who they're playing. Like one's against some team like Brunei or something, or the Philippines or something like that. So they should qualify really, and it'll be really exciting to see. Really interesting to see how well they do. You know, with all this money coming in, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Anything else? So yeah, I think that's about it. You know, just a quick thing. Talk about playing on a low level as I do against Chinese teams. You know, it's quite funny. The Chinese, when I've been on a few websites like Sunday League, 7-a-side websites, and they have like a banned list, like players who are banned from joining your team. It has the reasons, and there's lots of Chinese players like attacked the referee, attacked the linesman, spat at an official, stuff like that, which I suppose happens everywhere, but it's just, you know, they have a bad attitude on the pitch, I think. Some of them, you know, they play for like 2 hours at a time. They rent the pitch for 2 hours and they, you know, no subs, just play, you know. Then at half time they're sitting there chain smoking. Before the match they're sitting there chain smoking, and then they get on the pitch and play for 2 hours. It's quite funny. It reminds you of when you're younger and you can play, I suppose. I think ego comes into it a bit with international players. You know, we assume we're kind of above the level of Chinese football just because we're from England or whatever. But yeah, they play quite, some of them anyway. I'm not gonna tar them all with the same brush, but they can't really tackle. They play quite dirty tackles. But if you so much as, you know, catch their foot, they'll flop to the floor and they'll roll around on the floor for 10 minutes screaming. Their whole team will surround you. You know, when I first came to China, we played in a small league, and we were the only international team, and the other teams were Chinese, and we ended up winning the cup with them against all these Chinese teams. And then in the finals, you know, we were 1-0 up, and they started getting really annoyed just because I think they knew we were going to win, basically. And, you know, they start throwing these dirty tackles, and then if you so much as nip their toes with your boots, basically, there was a number of times it was all out brawls basically involving the whole team. So yeah, they got big attitude problems on the pitch, and yeah, if they don't get their own way with the refs or things like that, they lose their minds basically. So that's something they should really work on improving. So yeah, I'm sure over the next few years there'll be a lot more big names coming to China. You know, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what they do in the World Cup. Maybe the next few days there'll be some more big names going there. So yeah, for a change, did a topical video. Hope you enjoyed it. You have anything to say to me or ask me? You know, I'm not an expert on Chinese football. Oh yeah, there's also, you know, in the summer, during the off-season in Europe and China, lots of big teams come to China. Last year, I think Man United, Arsenal, AC Milan, Bayern Munich, they all came to Shanghai. But it's always at the weekends, so I've never been able to go because I have to work all day at the weekends. I'm really hoping to catch a game. Any game, you know. I want to start going to see the Shanghai SIPG games. They're literally 4 stages, like 10 minutes on the train away from me to, you know, that's where I play football. So that's so close to me, and I haven't been able to go there yet. So if I have to, I'll miss a day or two of work just to catch a couple of games, or hopefully some of the, like, you know, exhibition games where Bayern Munich come to town. They sell out really quickly, you know, these huge stadiums. So yeah, that's another sign of the popularity. It'd be good to see Bayern Munich play, or Inter, or Arsenal, or whoever. So yeah, I can't really think of anything else that needs to be said. I probably missed loads of things. Blah blah blah. Let me see. yeah, okay. So yeah, thanks for watching. Bye bye.